Gentlemen and elected members, we'll get started and Braden will join us when he's able to. If you'd like to stand, please. Acknowledge the traditional custodians of our beautiful lands and our. As a community, we recognise and respect their culture.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council and allow it to be an agent of change for the people of this direct and prosper its deliberations to the honouring of your name.
Gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in the foundation of Australia's freedom and liberty. We also proclaim our gratitude to those who returned.
Braden has just arrived, so that's great. There's no apologies today. I'd just like to remind elected members of the requirements of disclosure in relation to material, actual or perceived conflicts of interest in any items that we're going to be discussing tonight. Section 73, 74, 75, 75A and 75B of the Local Government Act require that you declare any interests and provide full and accurate details of the relevant interests of the council prior to the consideration of the item on the agenda. So if I can remind you of that, there may be some items tonight that require conflict of interest reminder. If we move to the minutes of the previous meeting, and the recommendation is that the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of May be confirmed as true and accurate. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Seconded by Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to it or have any questions? In that case, all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We do have a deputation tonight from the Back Valley Tennis Club from Julie Curran, who is the president. And following that deputation, if it's all right with the rest of the members, we will move to item 12.3, which relates to the Back Valley Tennis Club. But for now, we'll take Julie's deputation. Are you here, Julie? Oh, sorry, Tanya Little's standing in for Julie. I beg your pardon, Tanya. You have 10 minutes to talk, and that includes any questions from the elected members as well. So please.
Thank you. Oh, it's loud, isn't it? Thank you. Good afternoon, elected members. So yes, my name's Tanya Milne. I'm previously Tanya Little. I'm representing the Back Valley Tennis Club. I'm on the management committee, and recently my job's been to write grant applications. I've been a member of the club for over 40 years. It's a good club with talented players and hardworking members who also like to have a good time. And our courts and club rooms are in a beautiful setting. And I acknowledge how lucky we are to have the use of such an exceptional piece of council land adjacent to the Lower Inman Hall and Archery Club. We've handed out a double-sided map just so you can see where we're talking about. It's got a picture of the land and the courts on one side, and a close-up of the subject of our grant application on the other. So I'm here to speak about our approved grant from the Office of Recreation, Sport and Racing Infrastructure Projects Round 2021. Our project was called Upgrade to Court 4. Our club's continually improving and upgrading our premises, and this latest grant accompanies other planned and in progress improvements, including a new kitchen and hot water service, a defibrillator, a deck extension, and hopefully soon some court lights. Our venue is identified in Council's recreation and open space strategy as part of the Back Valley Sports Area, and it's earmarked in that document for Council to support maintenance of the facilities to a good standard by the user groups. And Council has indeed supported us in our past and recent endeavours. And I'd also like to make special mention of council staff member Michelle Griffiths, who's helped us navigate various aspects of these endeavours and grants. Our upgrade to Court 4 is for the purpose of bringing that court up to competition standard as per the court and enclosure dimensions of the International Tennis Federation and to make it safer for users. A few years back, we upgraded our other courts, courts 1 to 3, in the same manner. The width of Court 4, it's 17 metres across, and across that entire width at the back of the court, which is the side closest to the archery park, that has all collapsed, and we've got sort of slumping and splitting of the concrete. So our first job is that we propose to fix that slumped area, and then we'd like to extend the court by 1 metre at each end by building up the ground with fill and compacting, laying concrete and then surfacing it, and then building a new fence around that whole court after having pulled down the old one. The court will then comply with having 5.48 metres of what they call runoff area, which is between the baseline, which is where people serve the ball from, and the fence behind. So that brings it up to competition standard. The new fence will be 3.6 metres high to match the existing fencing around the other 3 courts. And the total length of new fencing around the court 4 is 75 metres, including gates. The total cost of the project is $38,154, and the grant that we've received covers half of that. The remainder comprises $10,777 of Back Valley Tennis Club's own funds, $800 of club members' labour to pull the old fence down, and a pledged contribution by council of $7,500 for the labour and materials for the earthworks at each end, without which we would have found it difficult to meet the applicant requirements of providing 50% of the total project costs. Note that we've completed an online development application form for the works, in particular due to the fence height. In our grant application, we've identified that we have about 100 regular users of our courts, plus additional less frequent users that arise from junior coaching, public court hire and occasional large social events. Having a competitive standard 4th court will be very helpful on days when 2 matches are scheduled at once. In this busy day and age, players, especially our young players who are desperately seeking to retain, they often require a quick turnaround to get off to work. So with the 4th court complete, there'll be more flexibility for those players, while others with more time, including those from visiting clubs, can have a relaxing afternoon and enjoy the ambience and great match viewing provided by our soon-to-be even more awesome facilities. Our club provides all year round tennis. Social tennis is very popular at our courts, with the contingent often filling more than the 4 courts. And even though our social tennis players aren't so fussed about the competition length, standard length court, we're conscious of the current safety issues around that 4th court, where the uneven ground and split concrete is a hazard, particularly for those in the older age brackets, which now includes me, I think, so I should really heed that. Our new setup will also provide better security. So just before I finish and ask if you'd like to ask any questions, I've got just a couple of things from the document that I mentioned, the City of Victor Harbour's Recreation and Open Space Strategy. Just wanted to point out how our project aligns with one of the theme goals in that document, which is sustainable outdoor and indoor sporting facilities that support an active community. And one of the key principles in that document aim to achieve good quality, sustainable, well-designed and managed sporting facilities that support all age groups to be active and engaged in the community. So our project does align with those. So can I finish by thanking Council once again for its support to date and inviting any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Are there any questions from any of the members? No? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it sounds like the Back Valley Tennis Club has been doing some great work over the last number of years. And certainly when I drive past there, it just looks beautiful.
It does
So
look
well
really
done,
nice.
well
Yeah,
done
we
to
love
you
it.
as well.
Thank you.
If we could now please turn to item 12.3, which is on page 99 of your agenda.
Mayor,
Councillor Littley?
I'm going to declare a conflict of interest as I'm a member of the club and the committee member of the Back Valley Tennis Club and playing member. I'll be remaining in the chamber just to hear discussion, but not to take part.
Can you tell me, Councillor Littley, what sort of conflict you'll be?
It's an actual conflict of
Actual
interest as a member, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Have you got a conflict of interest form to complete? Fabulous, thank you very much. So the first recommendation that we have here is that council receive and note the application for funding, Back Valley Tennis Club, extension to the 4th Tennis Court report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson and Councillor Schofield seconding. Do either of you want to speak to that? No, does anybody want to speak to receiving a note? No, if not, I will put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you.
Mayor Jenkins, I just have a question prior to go on for discussions. I understand Councillor Littley's an actual conflict of interest. Under the regulations or legislation, an actual conflict, you need to leave the room?
No, an actual material conflict, you need to leave
Yep,
the room.
just-
An actual conflict or a perceived conflict, you can stay in the room if you want to.
Thank you.
The second recommendation is that council approve a pre-budget commitment of $7,500 in-kind donation to the 2021-2022 budget to the Back Valley Tennis Club for the earthworks for the 4th Tennis Court extension at the Back Valley Recreation Ground. Moving that way, Councillor Henderson, and seconding Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Henderson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is a great facility, and from what Tanya has said, there's obviously a great need to use this 4th court. And obviously there is presently a safety risk associated with that court, and this needs to be addressed. But also, I think that this kind of support is one of the most important functions of a council, and it fits with our community plan aspirations of being a caring, connected and active community, and supporting the growth of local sporting clubs and their facilities, which is exactly what this would do. And of course, these facilities and these activities facilitate social interaction and improve health and well-being as well. So I think it's exactly the sort of thing we should be supporting.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson, did you want to say anything in seconding the motion? Do any members have any questions or want to say anything? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a few questions, if you don't mind, please. Is there a development application required for these types of works to be undertaken?
I'll ask Brian.
Through the mayor, potentially, I'd have to check the detail on this particular one and find out. So I'd have to take that one on notice.
Yeah, only reason why I asked because there are some costs involved in doing development applications if required, and do they have the funds to do that? That's one question. Under our sponsorship grants and donation type policies, I know there are certain limits when we do certain aspects. Is there an actual limit that council looks at when you look at a whole year process of looking at various requests for information or money? We've got quite a few coming up tonight. I'm just wondering, is there a limit that we put on? And is there a criteria around that we have to look at because we may have more requests than what we have available in our funding, because this is community money and we are supporting the community by giving them this, and I do support this, don't get me wrong. It's just the fact that I just want to know what about the limitations on how much do we actually set a limit to? And I guess under this one, this is an operating budget. Is there any way we can make this a capital budget? Because our sports facility grants are allocated. What's the budget limit for that one?
Through the Mayor, if I may, and Kathy may wish to help with this response. Obviously, Council has a variety of pockets of funds which it provides by way of grants, and whether they're sporting grants, they're community infrastructure grants, and they're to the club, so they're all operating. None of them are capital because they're actually the facilities of the clubs usually on council land. So they are all operating, not capital. If it was our asset that we were managing and maintaining, then it would be capital. As to the limit, donations, obviously council sets a budget in regards to what it provides by way of donations. There isn't, that budget supposedly is your cap, but there is very good examples of every year where you've exceeded that because you've had applications come to the chamber for various reasons that you've actually provided donations over and above what you've previously budgeted for. So, there may be a round where, council would have done a call for grants for sporting clubs for facilities, but it doesn't always time with when clubs actually receive grants from external bodies either. So that's the other dilemma. So no set answer to your questions, sorry.
Any further questions, Councillor Kemp?
No, it's fine. It's just a clarification around processes and ensuring that we do due diligence in our process, that we are, not over exceeding what we commit ourselves to. That's all.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, Councillor Charles?
Just to say that this is a very deserving club. I know that most of the tennis clubs that are left are doing their very best, but we certainly know through more than just a few years, but over scores of years, that this has been a very social club, a very prominent club that's done a lot of good for the community and the nearby community out in that area. If you say you're in the Back Valley Tennis Club, you've got a head start, I think. That's not taking it away from Victor Harbour, but then again, Port Elliot is a wonderful club too, the way that they're run, and that not taking it away from anybody else who's left, but I think this is part of our responsibility to back this sort of thing, because it's good for mental health. It's good for in so many ways. Tennis, as I think Tanya explained, it takes a full day to complete a day of tennis, and that's not necessarily what people are looking for these days. They want to be in and out, get the kids here, get the kids there, and it's a credit to them to be doing so well under those circumstances. So an extra court will help immensely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Councillor Mann, did you want to add anything? No. Councillor Henderson, would you like to close the debate? No. All right, I'll put that second recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Congratulations to the Back Valley Tennis Club. Well done. And thank you for your deputation as well. We go back to item 7. We've received a question from the gallery from Mr. Blatchford in relation to the Crozier Hill matter. These questions have been denied, as we've already advised him, given that we have enacted the unreasonable complainant procedure in relation to any questions that he might ask about Crozier Hill. We don't have any petitions tonight, and so that brings us to item 9.1, outstanding resolutions. The recommendation being, sorry, I'm getting.
Do we have a question from the gallery? Oh, okay. Sorry.
I didn't receive any email from you, Derek. I'll just check. I'll just ask the CEO to check. When did you send that? 2:58? No.
Mayor, would it be possible to put it to the council to decide? whether we can take this.
We need to follow the meeting procedures. We're just finding the question and having a look at when it arrived. Mr. McElroy, we've just found your question, which went through to the general email, didn't go straight to either CEO McCurdy or myself, but you can certainly come and ask your question now if you'd like to.
Thank you. Apologies, that was the email address that Michael was given to send it to. So if we've got the wrong email address, I'm very sorry. I'm going to read what I've got here, but actually I must apologise. There's some slight technical errors because this was done while I was driving down from Adelaide by Michael. So I'll read exactly what I've said. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. Preamble to our question. On behalf of Business Victor Harbor, I wish to ask questions in relation to agenda item 9.3, strategic planning key financial indicators. I note that the recommendation from the administration is for the elected members to receive and note the strategic planning key financial indicator report and adopt the 3 key financial indicators. Business Victor Harbor has already highlighted as part of the public consultation process for the 2021-22 business plan and budget that this is not consistent with the approved long-term financial plan and key financial indicator ratios. We understand that the long-term financial plan, inclusive of key financial indicators, has not been approved for public consultation by the Internal Audit Committee. Our questions are as follows. It is stated in item 9.3 that the key financial indicators are recommended by the Internal Audit Committee. However, this is in the context of the proposed long-term financial plan, if that plan is to be adopted. How can the key financial indicators as proposed in item 9.3 be recommended for adoption in isolation of an approved and endorsed long-term financial plan? And our second question, we'd like to understand why the key financial indicators have been removed from the approval process of the long-term financial plan and are now being recommended for adoption by the Council without considering all the details of the long-term financial plan. Those are our 2 questions, and thank you for letting us ask them.
Thank you. CEO?
Thank you, through the Mayor. Obviously, the response to your questions is fairly well articulated in the report. The 2 don't have to happen together. The long-term financial plan, we do have a current long-term financial plan. Those indicators are different to the ones that have been recommended by the External Audit Committee. We refer to it as internal. It is an independent audit committee that provides that advice to Council. Council's already acknowledged its indicators at its March meeting. It didn't actually endorse them. It should have endorsed them. And you can actually have the 2 happening concurrently. With the adopting of the annual business plan and budget for 2021, we want to be able to reference the new indicators if that is the Chamber's choice. Otherwise, we will need to reference the old indicators, which will only be changed if and when the long-term financial plan is reviewed and adopted. Council needs to review and adopt a long-term financial plan or its existing one every year after it adopts its annual business plan and budget. So it will do it anyway. We're just doing an extensive review at the same time. So there's no reason why the council can't do it. And that's what the administration is recommending, so that the long-term financial plan has the current ratios in it and are reflective of the current ratios and not the old ones. We made it very clear in the consultation that they were draft. We had a draft long-term financial plan. But this way, when we do adopt the annual business plan, they will be current. I don't know whether that answers your question.
It's an answer to the question for sure. I guess our point is, how can a change to targets be made in isolation to the actual plan that underpins that? I understand. I've read the item. That's why we're here. We don't understand, and we're not here to. We're just trying to understand on behalf of our members.
Yep.
How can you change targets without considering the plan that sits with it?
Because the plan will be amended accordingly. We're still reviewing the plan. So the plan will be amended based on those ratios. So the plan, the long-term financial plan, is still in draft.
Yeah, I get that. I guess the question is, isn't the target based on the plan?
It can be based on the plan, but you can also have different targets for different years within the plan as well.
Understand, but the justification for changing those are not in any of this information.
Oh, I can't make it any more clear than I've already tried. The long-term financial plan is a guide for the council for its longer-term planning. The most critical document for this council is its annual business plan and budget. It could, and it still operates under its existing long-term financial plan. And if that's the case, and we don't change the ratios, then it will be the previous ratios that the current annual business plan will be adopted against, only to be changed when the long-term financial plan is adopted, and then the two documents won't link together because one would have been adopted under old ratios and the new long-term financial plan will have new ratios, which aren't connected to the annual business plan and budget.
Fair enough, thank you.
Thank you. We now will move to item 9, which is the outstanding resolutions. And the recommendation is that council receive and note the outstanding resolutions report. Moving that way, Councillor Hales. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to the outstanding resolutions? Councillor Charles.
I've got 2 points on in the section where the completed resolutions are. There's one there for Encounter Bay Recreation Ground pedestrian access, which I believe is now being completed. That's not a big deal, but the question, I guess, is that refuge is complete now across the ring road?
Yes, it is.
So, okay, so there's another one gone. But the one that I was concerned about is, and I didn't go back through previous council documents I've got, but the lot 51, where we have a Minister Spears waiting to hear from council about the bike master plan and whether or not we want lot 51 to run our bike path through, and whether it could be vested in the city or however it's going to end up happening, is missing completely from all of these. And it just concerns me that there are people who have, I think, the expectation that they're going to be able to purchase the land, which is Crown land at this stage, to add to their residences so that they have a total block out. They can see the ocean all day, all night. So I'm just wondering where that's gone. Can somebody tell me where it's gone when it was removed? Or point to me where it is living now?
Through the Mayor, I don't believe that's an outstanding resolution. I can't remember the exact wording of the item, but my understanding is the Minister was undecided as to what he was doing with the property, and our next task was to undertake that master plan, or if Council choose to take the master plan, and if Council still wished to consider having that land sold to council for its purposes, we would need to give evidence of where it fit in with the master plan, because we had no evidence of that before. But there was no requirement for us that we must write back to the minister. Our task was to do that bike master plan. But I'll follow that up because I don't recall it sitting as an outstanding item. It was closed.
I'm pretty certain I've seen it there, so I will go back and look for it as well. But I'm concerned that it's been way over 12 months now and people will be getting edgy and we could miss out on lot 51 and that'll be the end of the potential of having the best bike track. That's a bit of a laugh, to be quite honest, because there's plenty of best bike tracks around Australia and walking paths that are superior to what we're offering people. But nevertheless, we've got the most superior location going through that area. And I know the minister's waiting. I know the minister approached each and every one of those owners of the homes and asked them their opinion and so on, and we almost lost it. And I don't want this to drag on to the point where it gets to the next council or gets forgotten altogether and the opportunity's lost.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. CEO will follow that up for you. There any further questions, Councillor Kemp?
Again, I guess it's a question around whether it was a resolution or not, but my understanding of this issue was that the CEO was going to write to the minister saying that we are interested in the land because of a master plan we were developing. And it's true, it's been 12 months since that we approved the funding for that master plan and it hasn't happened. And that is a problem. If the minister's waiting for us to provide some information as whether he makes a decision to sell it to private properties or give it to the council under whatever conditions, I thought we would have got back to him within 12 months with a
As I
master
said,
plan.
I'll ask the CEO to follow that up, Councillor Kemp. Any further questions in relation to the outstanding resolutions June report? Councillor Hales, did you want to close debate? Councillor Mann, is there anything that you want to say? No. In that case, then I'll put the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 9.2, review of the Code of Practice for Meeting Procedures. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the review, the Code of Practice for Meeting Procedures report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconded by Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation is that Council adopts the Code of Practice for Meeting Procedures with the recommended changes as provided at Attachment A under separate cover. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. And seconded by Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Charles.
Just to say that I'm disappointed that the setup of the agenda is not according to the regulations that were suggested by the Act. I do not understand why people are resistant to having, I've got my thoughts, but why people are resistant to having motions on notice and so on left to the very end of the meeting when everybody's gone to sleep. I can't see why these can't be put where the public are interested at the beginning, where they start off with some enthusiasm, and not after all the droning on of the yes, no, the yes, no's, where they get no explanation for about 2.5 hours on some occasions. We accept information from here and nobody gets an explanation as to what we're voting for, to be honest, unless they're following this and they say, okay. Anyway, so that's just it's my disappointment. It used to be that way. To me, it's like letters to the editor. Why do you buy the paper? To see the sport, to see your kids in their photographs playing tennis or whatever. You buy the paper to read the letters to the editor and perhaps the front page, and if there's a cover girl on the inside.
That's unnecessary.
I know, that's just
Councillor
to
Charles.
amuse my friend over there.
Councillor Kemp.
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. Just a couple of issues on the meeting procedures, page 13 of the meeting procedures under questions. I know that we used to, a question on notice, actually provide a rationale, which we still do, but we're not going to record it in the agenda, the actual rationale anymore. I believe this is correct because the way it reads. I oppose that. I think, if we go ask a question, I think the community would like to know why we're asking the question and the answer. So it's a three-way bet, and that, you do the rationale, you do the question, do the answer. That gives simplicity information to the community. And for taking out the rationale not to be recorded in the agenda, I don't think is what we've been doing, is giving good communication to our community. I'd like to see that put back in, if other members do agree. And the other one on page 39 of the meeting procedures, notifying the committee, which is number 2, under recordings and council and committee meetings. It talks about here that anyone who wants to record, irrespective of their recording, that could be written recording, needs to notify the presiding member before they actually record. We've never done that before, so I'm just wondering, we go to ask every time someone wants to record our meetings, they need to notify the presiding member at the time prior to the meeting, or there are certain recordings that are done which are constant, which maybe only one notification is required. But if someone comes in and wants to record audio, they need to notify. So I'm just wondering, this blanket statement really, I think, is I don't think it's a good practice, because as I said, even it's a written recording. So I'm just wondering whether after this is done that Mr. Simmons.
What page are you on?
Page 39 of the meeting procedures, under recording of council and committee meetings. That's about committee meetings. So I'm just wondering, do we need to actually get people who want to record? Mr. Simmons may have to approach you every time he wants to record.
No, page 41.
Through the Mayor, if I may, are you referring to the last 3 sentences that are in red? To protect the privacy of individuals attending meetings, the council requests that third parties not film, record or photograph the public gallery. Third parties' recordings must not be edited. Members of the public and or council members are not permitted to record confidential items of the committee, because that's word for word out of the live streaming policy that council has endorsed.
Have you found that section on 39? Page 39 talks about notification to the presiding member. Because I'm trying to look at the code of practice meeting here, which is, there's been many different ones put in here at times.
I don't see any of that on page.
Okay,
49.
okay. Again, we've got 2 sets of meeting procedures here. One's the old one, one's the new ones. If we don't get the right one when we talk to it, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's not in the new one because we've updated that to have word for word the live streaming policy, which doesn't have that in it.
Okay, fair enough. I was looking at the wrong meeting procedure, the edited one. Do apologise for that. But I do disagree with not providing some rationale behind a question on notice to give the reasons why we're asking a question.
Yep, so that was the wording. Preamble will be included in the agenda with questions. That's been striked out. You're wanting that to be included.
I believe so. I think that the community would like to get a bit of an idea why we're asking questions.
So for a variation or an amendment.
So do you want to look for a variation?
Just a variation. That's firstly just reinstate what was in the old procedures, that the rationale and the question and the answer will be recorded in the agenda and the minutes, which was the previous practice.
And are you happy with that, councillor Robertson and councillor Henderson? With that variation? Okay. That's 9.1. Okay. Thank you. Anything else, councillor Kemp?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments or anything else, any other questions in relation to the review of Code of Practice? Councillor Robertson, did you want to close the debate? No. In that case, then I'll put that recommendation adopts the Code of Practice for meeting procedures with the recommended changes as for attachment A, and including changes to item, was that 9.1 CEO, Victoria? Good. So with the addition of 9.2, council practice include preamble, which will be included in the agenda with the question. Councillor Charles, you've got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question. You asked councillor Kemp whether you'd like to do a variation or whatever. You didn't ask me. I personally would like to know from the councillors who seem to have so far gone along with putting the motions on notice at the end of the meeting as to why they feel that's necessary. To me, I think it smacks of hiding something.
We've closed debate, councillor Charles, on this matter. Councillor Robertson was the mover, and I'd asked him if he wanted to close debate. I'll put that recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Unanimous. Yep. We move to item 9.3 rather, strategic planning key financial indicators. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the report, moved by councillor Hales and seconded by councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to the report? Does anybody want to speak to the report or have any questions? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation is that council adopt the 3 key financial indicator targets as read. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Henderson. And seconded by councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Glasbrook.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I would like to speak to this. I'm a little bit concerned about this, in that it seems to me, or I get the feeling that we're just automatically adopting our net financial liabilities ratio of 100%, whereas the Audit Committee quite clearly stated that for it to be a maximum of 100%. And that came from a process where the original draft long-term financial plan had something in the order of 130% or 135%. I can't remember the exact figure. And when that was put to the Audit Committee, you know, I certainly believe that they were quite shocked at that level of debt. And
Councillor Glasbrook, can I just interrupt for a minute? In the recommendation, it says net financial liabilities ratio maximum of 100%.
Yes, I know it does, but I don't believe that that's the intent of council. I believe that we've taken that to mean that, oh, well, we can get to 100% and that's okay. Whereas I personally don't think that is okay. And I don't think that we've considered the other points that the Audit Committee made on that day, which were stated on page 25 probably of the printed copy, or 26 on the computer, is that council need to clarify its appetite for borrowings. Well, I think, that we should have a really good conversation about that personally. And that council need to consider the scenarios in relation to rate increases that these things are going to affect. And we need to consider the effect of interest rates, because they're only going to go one way. There's no doubt about that. There's already talk of interest rates going up before the Reserve Bank had anticipated. So I'm a little bit concerned. Well, from my point of view, I don't believe that we've discussed those points in detail. Certainly not in detail that I'm happy with. And I think that it probably should be part of our conversation that we will have when we do the long-term financial plan. And all of those things will need to be discussed and clarified. So that's my opinion. I don't think, I'm not going to support it. I know the audit committee have made that recommendation, but as I said, it's a recommendation that is for an absolute maximum. And I don't believe that they really intended for us to get to that level. It was interesting that when we had the meeting with the local government finance authority, I believe from my memory, I did write it down, but I couldn't find it, that the average for South Australian governments is around 30%. It might be 40%, I could have, but I thought it was 30%. And yet for somehow Victor Harbour seems, this next financial year, we're going for 75%. Why does Victor Harbour want to be in that level of debt? I don't believe that the people out in the community do. And I don't believe that we've discussed it fully. Certainly, I'm not satisfied that we have anyway. So therefore, I'll just vote against it, but I'm just stating why. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Did you want to respond to that at all? Councillor Kemp and then Councillor Robertson.
Yes, I guess I'll start with the question, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because the annual business plan, the long-term financial plan, when you read the long-term financial plan, it states in there that it actually feeds the annual business plan. We have a 10-year plan that looks at our finances. Yes, the first 4 or 5 years are very locked in pretty well, and that feeds into our annual business plan. So what should come first? Our long-term financial plan, that is approved, and off that comes our annual plan with additional information that goes into it. So I think we're doing it the wrong way around. We actually approve our annual business plan, then we approve our long-term financial plan. I think, again, these targets, when they first were muted going back a few months ago, I didn't support them because I think that part of these financial indicators to me, and some people of the community would mostly look at it this way, is one way of looking at performance of council. And if we have a spread where you can fall in between a certain figure, either negative or positive, you're doing all right, but really, are we doing all right? If we had a bit more of a finer target to set at, something like instead of a 90 to 110% for asset renewal funding, we want to always achieve 100%. We don't want to go to 110. If we're achieving 100%, we can't really do any more than that. I think we're doing a fantastic job. And if we set our operating surplus ratio around 2%, always work towards a surplus or a break-even budget. If we set a simple target, if we don't make it or over it, then there's reasons why, and that's where you look at review your performance. If we're doing something really fantastic, let's keep doing it. If we're doing something badly, let's change it so we don't do it, continue to do badly. So when we set these targets, again, this is about how we perform as a council, how our decision making. So I think really when you have a spread like this, I won't support these figures. I think the liabilities ratio is 100% of your rate of your revenue is really putting you at a high risk. I think somewhere around 50 to 75% gives you a little bit of collateral to follow up if something happens where you need further money. You can draw upon it. But again, if we do our asset management plans properly, our long-term financial plans properly, the annual plan is implementing those projects out of those plans. That's why the others have to be done first before we do the annual plan. This way we can really look at it and see what we can achieve. And when we're talking about the targets and ensuring that our capacity, our community can pay for all this, because we are a 10,500 ratepayer base. And I'm not quite sure when we're talking about the intergenerational reports that are coming out now showing that by 2060, our population is declining and our elderly people are increasing. So that puts a great burden on social, with governments, and which means that if that trend's here, that we've got more older people coming to Victor Harbour who are struggling under socioeconomical issues, more so than young families who we need here to actually support the economy and get businesses growing. So I think as a council, we need to be a bit more prudent in how we set our targets and how we indicate to our community how we're performing. And if we're performing bad, fine, let's fix it. If we're performing good, let's keep doing it. But having these types of targets and having this maximum of our borrowings is really putting our council at risk and our community to pay for this. It won't be us, it will be our younger generations coming along. So I won't be supporting this either. I still believe what Councillor Glasbrook said, we should have better communication and more discussions about this.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The great weakness in these ratios, and as has been highlighted by Councillors Glasbrook and Kemp, is this net financial liabilities ratio. I'm not sure that we really would have intended that, that it would have been extraordinary circumstances where the net financial liabilities ratio reaches 100%. And there will be some occasions when perhaps it's appropriate or even prudent to reach that level. The problem that we've been getting into here is that we don't set a reasonable target as we do, well, in a minor kind of way with the operating surplus ratio -2 to +2%, achieving a 3-year rolling target of 0%. I believe that that maximum, the net financial liabilities ratio should ordinarily be way less than 100%. But if you look at some of the projections in our long-term financial plan that were being produced in documents earlier this year, we've crept up. The net financial liabilities ratio is suddenly, in very early versions, it jumped up over 100%. But now it doesn't go over 100%, but it goes up there and it stays up there. And that's the thing that is so dangerous about following a set of targets like this, is that definitely you are digging yourself a very deep hole if you think that it's okay to have a net financial liabilities ratio equal to the rates income, because you're in deep water. After you've bumped into that target a long enough number of years, suddenly you'll be drowning in interest payments. So to me, it's a foolish ratio, that one we've got there. We should be looking at a maximum of 100%, and there'll be years when that's appropriate, but we should be aiming to achieve a figure that's lower than that. Over like it says in the first one there, to achieve a 3-year rolling target of, say, 90% or 80%. But to me, I take the warning signals that Councillor Glasbrook talked about. Interest rates will be rising, and we also have a customer base that's getting older. And although we've got significant, young people coming to, numbers of young people coming to Victor, we can't guarantee that we'll be able to, our ratepayer base will continue to be happy with paying the rate increases we presently impose on them.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to add? Councillor Littley?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm in agreement with the 3 councillors directly opposite me on this one, but what I am sure of is that I need more time to have discussion, and I think discussion would benefit me, so I won't be supporting this tonight, and look forward to more discussion on the topic so I can learn more.
Councillor Mann?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I note the discussions around the chamber. I guess from my view is that we have had a lot of discussions and workshops on these very ratios. I feel like we've done a lot of work and we've had a lot of experts come to talk to us about how these ratios work, how they're balanced. And I guess I'm not necessarily hearing that come across from the other members, but again, that's my view. And I think, and I respect the views, but I guess I have a different opinion on the motion here. Victor Harbour, we've got very low levels of debt at the moment. Our fiscal management has been excellent, and it's put us in a great position to undertake some really excellent larger community projects, which will have significant outcomes. And we've spent plenty of time talking about what projects we want to do and how we shape the long-term financial plan to allow us to do those projects. And I guess the whole chicken and the egg debate. I think that I guess how these ratios work in that balancing together, where we want an operating surplus ratio to be 0% across a 3-year sort of rolling target, which is why that net financial liability ratio can be the 100%. And it's the movement between the two which I appreciate. And I think that these are excellent ratios because they do give us that bit of flexibility, because I think in the practical world of local government, we can't just achieve 0% to 100% every year when we want to start big projects or do different things. It's not necessarily possible, and there will be some years where it will be a bit higher and some years where it will be lower. And I think these targets help us to achieve them and set some significant strength in making our long-term financial plan and choosing which projects we want to do. Because I guess if we were to make them one thing one year and then we fail that year and then we change them the next year, and I don't think that achieves much more than what we've got right now. And I note the discussions around we don't want to be harming the generations of the future and the kids of the future. But I guess from what I'm hearing, there's around the debt and around the different projects, there's a potential here to give generations in the future a lot more benefit, because we can use the debt to spread out the cost of these big projects that we're wanting to do over multiple generations. And debt gives us that great ability as a council to use it that way. But from what I'm hearing around the table is that if we don't look to do that, then we're just going to be overtaxing our current ratepayers. So our current voters will be overtaxing them now to benefit the generations of the future. And I think that in that long-term financial, view that we need to have, I think we need to make sure that we're taxing everyone evenly, because it will be future generations who get the benefit of these larger projects as well. And that's my views, and it's a bit, conflicting with other councillors, but I think we have done a lot of work on these ratios, and it's not something that's just been picked up and we're choosing it without any discussion or information or proper analysis of our financial projections. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Are there any, Councillor Hales?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I won't repeat any of the stuff that Councillor Mann's covered, because he's covered it well, but I certainly agree with the sentiment that he's put forward. I'd also, challenge I've just had a bit of a browse at some other documents from around the region, their budgets, annual business plans, to look at similar councils' debt levels. And we look at Alexandrina, they're at 83% net financial liabilities, Yankalill's at 61%, Murray Bridge 73.5%, and the big one would be Onkaparinga at 82%. And that's off a $135 million budget. So that's a lot of debt. Comparatively, where we sit right now is nowhere near the levels that they are currently at. Absolutely, we're looking towards the future. We're looking at an ambitious program of works. But I think the motion before us, it says it in black and white, net financial liabilities ratio, maximum of 100%. I think in response to the Audit Committee's, Council needs to clarify its appetite for borrowings if I vote for this motion, that's my appetite for borrowings. It's black and white, it's clear. I don't think I could be any clearer in that regard. I think also we need to make sure that we're considering ourselves as a level of government, that we are different to the average small business in our community. If we look at the federal government this year, they adopted a budget that had net financial liabilities, if we do their ratio, over 200%. If we do their operating surplus ratio, negative, over 20% negative. Governments operate in a different sphere to other businesses, and it's because they play a different role in the economy, they play a different role in our community. And so we need to be mindful of this when we're talking about budgets. Absolutely. If a coffee shop down the road was operating at those levels, they'd be bankrupt and selling the house. But unlike the coffee shop down the road, the City of Victor Harbor continues to exist regardless of where the economy is at, unless the state government chooses to abolish local government. That's a whole nother conversation. But unlike the state government, we're far better at raising our own revenue. We're not asking the federal government for most of our revenue. So I'll be voting in favour of this motion. I think they're reasonable targets. The operating surplus ratio and asset renewal ones have 3-year rolling averages, which is smart. And so, yeah, I fully support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Is there any further discussion? You've got a question?
I have a question. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. If we adopt the draft annual business plan at the moment as it is, which went out for public consultation, would that not make our net financial liabilities ratio 74% if we adopted the plan? And secondly, if everyone else jumped off the cliff, do we follow as well? Because they got large liabilities.
Can you answer that first question?
I can't answer the question based on the annual business plan and budget. Obviously, that's not been, there's a number of elements still coming in and going out in regards to that. So until we look at those final figures, because we still haven't had the Valuer General's final figures in as yet. So I don't know what our total borrowings will be or which projects are in or out of the annual business plan and budget. But you did make a question reference earlier, though. You're saying that the long-term financial plan and asset management plans must be endorsed before the annual business plan and budget. Your annual business plan and budget is your required document that you must have endorsed before the 31st of August. You have an existing long-term financial plan and asset management plan. At the moment, yes, they don't all align because you've made some significant changes to your strategic projects and your appetite for doing those projects. But your requirement, first and foremost, is the adoption of the annual business plan and budget. The Chamber can choose to adopt it with your existing ratios, but again, then it will be out of line with your long-term financial plans when you do eventually adopt them, if you put the new ratios in them.
Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. With this on the agenda tonight, I did go to the local government website to remind myself what the suggested targets are for local governments with respect to these ratios. And the suggested target for the asset renewal funding ratio is to be greater than 90%. Because this indicates whether we have the financial capacity to fund asset renewal as required, and we can continue to provide existing levels of services in the future without additional operating income or reductions in operating expenses. And our target is right on target with respect to the recommendations. Also, with the net financial liability ratio, it can be anything from 0% to 100% and possibly higher in some circumstances is suggested by the Local Government Association. And asks the questions, are assets being renewed and replaced in an optimal way? And again, we're right on target. 40 to 60% is right on target, which is our current target, and indicates that net financial debt can be serviced by operating revenues. So in these respects, we are right on target. We've had lots of discussion on this, as Councillor Mann has already said, and I will be voting in favour of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. I'll now put this to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is lost. And we now move to item 10.2. 10.1, beg your pardon. Yep. Councillor Hales?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'll take this opportunity to declare a material conflict of interest for all of this item. As a member involved in a group that was engaged through the process of this review and could stand to benefit from the outcomes of it, I'll declare my material conflict of interest and leave the chamber for the entirety of this item.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. So this is item 10.1, review of community services, and the first recommendation is that council receive and note the review and the report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And somebody seconding the report? Councillor Robertson, thank you. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting it? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the amount of effort that was put into this report by Highwire and all of the effort that was put in by the community services staff and so on. But I find this this report, even the revised version of it, to be less than satisfactory. I'll come to some of the detail a bit later on, but I would just like to ask people to look at, you know, the key issues which are in the report itself on pages 41 and 42, where it's got a tucked away in there a nice summary of the recommendations and the change management plan. You know, this review of community services has been ongoing for over a year. We have a very hard-working staff, Simons, who's been looking after this portfolio for a long time. It's been 15 months, I think, since Mr. Oliphant left or resigned. And finally, we're getting to get this community services review. And I find the report to has some interesting stuff in there and some good recommendations, which I'll come to a bit later on. But overall, I find it, you know, a very unsatisfactory report, because it actually leaves more questions than it does answers. And I don't believe that it has fulfilled the terms of reference it was given in some respects, but it's left us with a massive amount of work to do if you look at what it's suggesting needs to be done after Highwire has finished, you know, describing the situation. So I just wanted to say that at this stage of the debate on this item.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else have any questions or comments in relation to receiving and noting the report? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation is that council endorse option 3, maintain service delivery with role clarification for the 2021-22 financial year, with consideration for further transitions beyond 30th of June 2022. Someone move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconding that, do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? No, does anybody want to speak to that or have any questions? Councillor Charles and then Councillor Robertson.
Well, I got to page 10 and then didn't find sufficient time to go back to go through it again. But I was present at all of these presentations by the Highwire group, and I found the last one was really not that informative. in this chamber from the people. I personally would like to have this matter adjourned so that we can spend some more time on it. That's what I'd put up, that formal motion, adjournment on this item, so that we can go through this a little bit more thoroughly. It is my fault that I couldn't go any further, but 80 pages is a lot to digest. And I do agree with
Sorry,
Councillor Robinson said that it does provide more work than it does fix.
Have you just
I have.
put forward a formal motion
I
to
have.
adjourn the matter?
I have.
Okay. To when?
Till when after we've had yet another opportunity to have an informal gathering or whatever is necessary to thrash it out.
Okay. Okay, to adjourn it until a further formal gathering. Are you happy with that?
If that is sufficient
instructed.
and works with the management, I'm happy with that.
Do I have a seconder for that formal motion? Councillor Kemp? There's no debate on a formal motion, so all those in favour? Those against? That formal motion is carried. Councillor Kemp seconded it. Yeah, thank you, Leanne. Because that's been adjourned, we probably won't need, well, we won't need you. Thank you very much for beaming in.
You're welcome, and yeah, good night.
Have good night. Councillor Robertson?
I'd like to ask you a question about this. Like I said before, I appreciate the amount of work that went into this
Sorry,
report.
Councillor Robertson, this item's been adjourned.
Yeah,
So
well,
we're moving on to the next one.
yeah, but what? Well, then, what is it we're going to be doing about coming back to this? Because this has been ground that's been ploughed over for, well, you know, near on a year. It's urgent that we get this stuff fixed up.
Well, you just voted for this to be adjourned until there's another meeting. So the administration will organise another meeting where we can talk about it, and then we'll bring it back to the next council meeting after that.
Okay, I hope we do it quickly.
We now move to 10.2, which is rescission. Oh, let's get Councillor Hales back. Brayden. 10.2, rescission of land management agreement. I can probably do these actually on block, these recommendations, if you're happy for that. So I'll move recommendation 1, 2 and 3 on block if someone would like to move that way. Councillor Schofield. And was that you, Councillor Glasbrook? Either of you like to speak to it? Anyone like to speak to it? Councillor Charles?
I've looked at the block, as you would expect. I saw the work going on there when they were clearing the old house off the property. And I see it's far more practical than having something halfway up, well, not, that's stupid to say halfway up Seaview Road, but a distance up Seaview Road that really has not provided any useful space for the shopping centre. But don't even know where the staff cars parked there, but that would be practical. That's about it. I think this particular car park would be useful for staff cars and any other people who creep in there to go to their shops and wherever else they work. But it's so close to the current entry to Drake's, and from what I can see, it's a very tight. It's not a hard left turn, but it certainly doesn't allow traffic to flow in easily. And if somebody's coming out at the same time, we've got more stoppage and, you know, cramp points. Somebody puts their indicator on early to go in there. People suspect they're going in at the next one. There can be bumper to bumper collisions and things like that, but that's of course the problem with the person who's following. It just seems to me that the driveway is not suitable for easy in and easy out. I'd like to see it improved or some sort of encouragement for the people who are building to do so.
That's not what this recommendation's about. So
Which
they've built this, they've got their new car park at Torrens Street.
Indeed.
So they no longer need the car park that they were leasing off Councillor Clearview Road. It's that.
Thank you for drawing that to my attention. So we're not, this has already been decided on in CAP, has it?
Yep.
It has.
Yeah,
So
it's already gone.
it is what it is.
So we're just looking at the rescission of the land management
Not
agreement.
a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, question please, I guess to Director Padhouse. Yeah, it's a done deal, but was the arrangement for having this car park on 9 Torrens Road, was there any assessment done of what the impact on traffic would be? And one of the things that when looking at this, just all of a sudden it's become a car park, and I guess everyone's noticed that too. But I mean, once it gets going as a serious car park, there's going to be lots of people that are, I think it's quite a popular, I do my shopping at Drake's, but the turning in and out of cars into that 9 Torrens Road is surely going to have an impact on the flow of traffic running northwards along Torrens Road, and particularly to the potentially to the right-hand lane that's created is the turning into Ocean Street. I just wondered if there was any assessment done of the impact on traffic. It didn't get a mention in here.
Yeah, through the mayor, as with Councillor Charles, it's actually not what the matter's about, but in terms of the assessment of the car park as a development application, it was accompanied by a traffic report, the mandatory sort of a traffic report that needs to be required. So council can be satisfied that it meets the access and egress requirements, relevant Australian standards and those sort of things. So it subsequently received the development approval. So that would have been on the basis that council, our infrastructure staff would have been satisfied that that meets the requirements.
Are there any questions or any further comments? If not, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 12, request for funding support for wildlife welfare organisation. And I'll do the first recommendation that we receive and note the report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley. And seconded by Councillor Charles. Either of you want to speak to this? Anyone want to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. And we have 3 recommendations there for you to choose from. Someone wants to move one. Councillor Henderson.
I'd like to move the first of those 3.
So that is that council, in recognition of the work that Wildlife Welfare Organisation does within the Victor Harbour region, provide a funding contribution of $20,000 over 2 years. That's $10,000 per year for 2 years to assist with the running costs of the rescue vehicle. That's correct?
That's correct.
Do you want to speak to that?
I do. Obviously, this group, the Wildlife Welfare Organisation, has a long history of delivering much needed service. And I think our community would be very happy to see us supporting such a service. To date, they've received no state government funding at all, ever. And funding has solely relied on donations and money raised via fundraising activities of the group itself. So I think it's a very worthy cause, and I think our community would be happy for us to help this organisation to continue their good work.
Thank you. And sorry, I didn't ask for a seconder before that, but you had your hand up, Councillor Charles.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I believe this is an essential service, to be quite honest. I'm not being emotive about this at all, but people who hit animals, particularly big animals, kangaroos and so on, if they don't know how to put the animal out of its misery, they get distressed. So it's distressful on people, it's distressful on the wildlife. I think this service is absolutely essential, and you can only give credit to these people for doing what they do. Alexandrina Council have put in $32,000, as we know, and they certainly cover a larger area than what we do. But I think it's proportionate, and I think we need to support it for the $20,000, which is $10,000 per year. I'd hate to not have these people available. That's how I see it. And as Councillor Kemp said, this is another one of these things that just slips in, and one that probably will get through and put the budget under some pressure again.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Councillor Littley.
Yeah, I do support this. I've got to say that I am a little bit reluctant to do at the $20,000 rate. I probably would have been more comfortable with the contribution where we set that. One that is enables us to cap that contribution. Councillor Charles is correct though in saying that I guess the trauma on our residents and ratepayers that this wildlife welfare organisation eliminates from our ratepayers having to deal with isn't insignificant. You're right, Councillor Charles, that a lot of people don't know how to handle animals when they've been struck. I congratulate the Wildlife Welfare Organisation on their work, but also on their fundraising, and I'd like to encourage them to keep chasing those channels of fundraising. And I am concerned that they've never got any funding from the state government. So I don't believe it's our place to fill that void, but at this time, I'm going to support filling that void.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Does anybody else want to speak to this or have any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Mayor. I would have supported the second option because I think that what we should. I hear what's being said about the value of the services provided, but I think that these things can end up being very easily becoming an annual expectation, and organisations like this one that's operated for many years without having any support from the government should be encouraged to do that, and and having a support, having a crutch within their finance system, particularly for operating costs, means that that they're likely to take. There'll be a feeling that they've got an expectation they don't have to raise funds as hard, and I'd also would have recommended that we just do 1 year and set some targets in terms of performance indicators for what was be done with that money, and then see how they went with that. If it was indeed something that they met those targets and could prove that they spent the money effectively, then we could consider another annual contribution. But I think that we should be looking to these organisations to be more self-reliant than that. So I'll not be voting for this option 1.
Is there any further discussion?
Oh, sorry. And I would also wouldn't like to be backing in money into the 22-23 budget as a matter of principle.
Thank you. There any further discussion on this? Councillor Henderson, did you want to close the debate? I'll put the motion to the floor. Sorry, Councillor Mann, did you want to say anything? No. I'll put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That motion's carried. Thank you.
I have a division on that, please, Mayor.
Certainly, all those in favour, please stand. Councillor Mann. We'll just wait for Karina. Councillor Charles. Ready? Councillor Mann. Councillor Littley. Councillor Kemp. Councillor Glasbrook. And Councillor Henderson. And against is Councillor Hales. Councillor Charles. Councillor Robertson. And Councillor Schofield. That motion is carried. We now move to item 12.2, Victor Dragon's lease proposal. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Robertson, and seconded Councillor Schofield. Either of you like to speak to the receiving, noting the report? Anybody want to have any questions? Councillor Charles?
I'd say it now rather than saying it when we get down further into the rest of the recommendations. I'm disappointed, of course, for the Dragon Club, because it seems to be a concern to too many people, and we've got to follow what the majority say in this particular case, because there's so many of them. Otherwise, I wouldn't think that the sheds are going to cause too much difficulty, just like a dump point wouldn't have in the same location. But I'm just sad that we've got this where we have to decline, and the Dragon boat's been waiting for 21 years or something or other for somewhere to put the thing, and that there's not some other recommendation as an alternative. So, okay, bad luck here, but good luck here. And I have one which I've sent to councillors by email today, and I'll talk about that perhaps a little bit later on. But I'd like to perhaps make an appointment. I did try to catch Kathy Hayter today, but was unsuccessful. But I think there are other options in the same location, on the same grounds, but not in the same location, which would be very, very safe and would fix the problem for the Dragons.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Kathy Hayter might have some more information or be able to respond to that.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Sorry, Councillor, that I wasn't able to get back to you today. So the location that you're suggesting, as in the drawings that you sent through near the scoreboard there, is it?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't realise you were at the meeting. I wasn't. I would have addressed you otherwise. I thought you were not here. And that's the reason why I thought I didn't get a return phone call. But yes, when we drive in to the Encounter Bay Sporting Precinct, there's a cyclone wire fence on the left-hand side. And if a gateway is put through that, a long trailer boat could be driven in through there and diagonally across through the scrub there, which I believe is protected, virgin, native, whatever it may be. But from my observations today and walkthrough, we're only needing a shed of 4 metres wide and so many metres long, and it was 18 or something or other. It needs to just simply be a road that comes in, goes through one side of the shed, comes out the other, and there'll be plenty of room to turn the boat around and remove. So this is an area that's currently not being used. And it would also provide them with a little bit of advertising too, because it's on the edge of the road where everybody walks in, drives in. And people would note with, you know, some discreet and attractive signage, this is a dragon boat shed. They might want to join and become members. Anyway, we can do that later if it's all right with our CEO. Thank you.
Any further questions or commentary on receiving and noting? I'll put that to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. So you have 2 recommendations there. Council decline to support the granting of a lease, to continue with the liaising with Victor Dragons, and to report back to the club when the suitable land is identified. And number 3 as well. So we can do those on block 2 and 3 on block. To move
I'd like to just do number 2 if we could.
just number 2? Sure.
Yes, thank you.
All right,
I'm happy to
Tim,
move that too if you
moving
like.
that way? Yep. Do I have a seconder for number 2? Councillor Littley? Thank you. Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Glassbrook?
Oh, just quickly, I was always concerned with that location. I didn't think it was the right spot. It gets very busy in that Encounter Bay precinct at times. Yeah, there could be a good opportunity here to tie this in with our new sports facility when it ever comes. If I'm still alive, I'm not sure. Probably may not be alive. Yeah. So yeah, I'm very happy to support this. I think this is, although very unfortunate for the Dragons, and I do feel sorry for them, but I think it's the right decision.
Thank you, Councillor Glassbrook. Councillor Littley?
Yeah, there certainly were concerns about that location in the Encounter Bay Sporting Precinct. Over recent weeks, sort of the past month, there was one single 10km/h sign put in the middle of the driveway as you come into the Encounter Bay Precinct, and that survived all of 2 weeks because people couldn't navigate around a single sign. I was very concerned about quite a large 18 metre by 4 metre wide shed in an area that is very much used by the netball club traffic. There are many, or sorry, not many. There are a number of options that have been put forward that would be suitable within the Encounter Bay Sporting Precinct that I understand have been discussed, and I know to members of the sporting clubs, combined sporting clubs, are confused as to why this one landed as it did, because there's other suitable options that give very close to that one location as well that haven't been considered. So, and there's others around the place. Councillor Charles's suggestion may work, but we've been told, the members of the club, at least for the past, or the sporting clubs for the past 4 years, have been told that it's hands off that native vegetation, and it hasn't been closely looked at because of that reason. I don't know how it would work, but it may work. And Councillor Charles has said, when we have a look at this motion that's on the table, I include Encounter Bay Sporting Precinct when you talk about identify a suitable site for Victor Dragons. It's still in that area, there's still a potential suitable site there, and I encourage us to investigate that. And I know that combined Encounter Bay Sporting clubs are eager to accommodate the Victor Dragons as well.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Is there Councillor Kemp?
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. I've got a couple of questions first. Has the Victor Dragons put in a development application yet to look at building a shed on site? Because if they haven't or have, it may affect if they don't get a lease arrangement, and also owner's consent to build. So that would follow, I would imagine, after they found a suitable location.
Through the mayor, no, they haven't put in an application.
Is there a timeline for them to put an application in so we see exactly what it looks like, how big it is, where it's going? Because when you get to building consent, they already have the engineering aspects of designs of the shed, the size, all that. And there may be extra costs they don't know about yet, which may impact on the council coming back to us asking for more money.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Kemp. So the shed itself is 16 by 8 metres. And I think they're waiting for us to find a location before they lodge any sort of application. So we need to go and speak with them again about other potential locations.
And just a final question, thank you. That development application and the cost to that, to get that done, is that covered by them or is it expected to be covered by a council as part of the in-kind contribution?
Through the Mayor, we haven't discussed that with them. Can't give an answer on that, but I can certainly ask them.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Are there any further questions or any further discussion? In that case, I'll put the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. So item recommendation 3, sorry. That council consider the allocation of $25,000, being $20,000 in cash, $5,000 in kind, and the 2021-22 budget to assist Victor Dragons with the construction of a storage and maintenance shed when a suitable location is identified. Councillor Kemp moving that way and Councillor Henderson seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that?
Yep.
Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'd like to do a variation to this because I think not just on the locations identified to allocate this money in the next year's budget, I think also subject to development approval and owner's consent should be a part of this recommendation. Because if they put an application in and it gets knocked back, then, you know, why should we allocate money? So it should be subject to development approval and owner's consent once the location. So if we could just add on the end, subject to development approval and owner's consent.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Henderson? Do anything else you want to say, Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, I think again we're committing to support Victor Dragons. Again, they provide a certain type of wealth and well-being to the people who get involved on the lake and get into competition in that respect, this type of sport. If they can actually find a location which everyone's happy with and they've got the funds on their side, the development approval comes through and the owners give consent and it all works well, fantastic. Again, one of the things that will come out of the development application would be around the construction works for the groundworks, because it may be the area which might be located may not be suitable for vehicle traffic because there's no bitumen there. So there may be additional cost that may come as well in the future. That's just a thought process. But yeah, I think it's a good area to give the Victor Dragons an opportunity to set up a home base and continue for many years to come.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, I'm optimistic that another location within the Encounter Bay recreational grounds will be found for the dragon boats, and I hope that is found in the very near future. And these people have been asking for a permanent storage facility for years and years now, and if we can help them achieve that in the very near future rather than the long term, I think that would be a very good thing to do.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to this motion or have any questions? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 12.3 we've done. That's the Back Valley Tennis Club. So we now move to 12.4. And here we have the multi-purpose boat landing facility business case. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Charles. And seconding that, Councillor Robertson. Either of you like to speak to receiving and noting the report? Councillor Charles?
No problems with doing so. But as you know, I foreshadowed an alternative motion to number 2 coming up. I can speak to that then. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak to receiving and noting the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Charles, you had a foreshadowed motion.
Thank you. The report on the multi-purpose boat landing facility in the business case and so on has many. There are many concerns. It's going to be well. I think everybody who's read the information will see that there's a few guesses and uncertainties about what may happen after it's been built and in the location that has been selected at this stage. So the motion that I thought I would put in and test the waters, because I can't see that it is fair that we should spend another $250,000 to undertake further investigations when it's not necessarily a benefit just to ourselves here in Victor Harbour. It'll be a benefit to Adelaide and every suburb south of Adelaide if cruise boats come in. So I'll just read what I've got here, that the council seek a discussion with the Premier of South Australia, the Honourable Stephen Marshall, who is also the Minister of Tourism, to discuss ways to provide a multi-purpose boat landing facility at Victor Harbour for the greater benefit of Adelaide and all council districts south of the city. And my little story that goes with that is I believe the business case demonstrates that it would be a bad business for the Victor Harbour Council to undertake alone. It is on its own. There are too many ifs and too many risks. The ongoing costs are high and there are other possible challenges which are incalculable until after it's built, like seagrass build-up and dredging, possible dredging, damage to other areas of beach due to current diversions, traffic modifications to many roads and intersections, and the new on-land infrastructure car parks. This is a state affair. It is plain and clear that if cruise ships dock, they will bus clients to attractions out of the district of Victor Harbour. A minimal number of people will remain and others will also remain on the ship. Victor Harbour, as I see it, may become less attractive to many visitors as we attempt to cram more people into a peak time, and any time to be honest, which simply reduces the quality of life in the city. Goa, so we're paying a price essentially if we do this, and we're not only paying the price, we're actually funding it. Goa, Currency Creek, McLaren Vale, Harndorf, Normanville, Second Valley, Wollonga and more all stand to benefit. So since there is one location suitable that they can all contribute to, point I'm trying to make there is that there is really only one location where a multi-purpose bulk landing facility can be put, all the way around from Port Adelaide to trying to think of the place, just down from Normanville. Anyway, beside the point, doesn't matter. And then to here, and then all the way down to the southeast after that. There are no suitable locations. So we've got it. Now, are we going to sacrifice it and sustain all the costs that are involved in the future maintenance costs on our own? Why should we? I think this is a state government affair and we need to be doing some conversation with them.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Do I have someone to second that motion? Councillor Henderson? Do you want to speak to it?
Can I first of all suggest a variation to that motion in that we replace the words Victor Harbour for regional?
That should get them. I think it's a good idea.
So you want to say provide a regional multi-purpose boat landing facility. Take out Victor Harbour.
Yes.
Are you both happy with the wording of that? Councillor Charles, are you happy with that?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
You happy with that?
Yes, I am.
Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I agree with what Councillor Charles has said. I do think this is a regional affair. It's not, I don't feel it's a burden that should be carried on the shoulders of the ratepayers of Victor Harbour, especially given the proposed cost of building such a facility. And not only those costs, but the ongoing costs of at least $600,000 a year for the maintenance and the dredging, etc. Yes, there have been pointed out some of the benefits of having a facility, but unfortunately, I think the negatives outweigh the positives in that respect. Some of the environmental impacts have already been touched on by Councillor Charles. We have one of the most important seagrass areas exactly where this proposed boating facility was to go in Victor Harbour. And I think the environmental impact of that is just too great for us to even contemplate that such a facility should go in that position. And I could go on talking about the benefits of that seagrass area, but given that we have this motion on the board now, I think we'll just go with that. If it's supported.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson and then Councillor Littley.
Yes, Mayor, I'll be definitely voting against this. My goodness, councillors, you know, have you not read what's in front of you? We've had this proposal in front of council now. There's been about 17 reports done on this in nearly 30 years. And don't forget that one of the main rationales for building this facility on the eastern beach is that at the Bluff boat ramp, if you've been down there any time during the holiday period, and this year there was no gap between the traditional Christmas school holiday period in terms of choking up of the roads in Encounter Bay and Easter. It just kept on going. And short of having, you know, a whole lot of more car parking being put into the sea on reclaimed land on the down at the Bluff boat ramp, we have a problem. And this is these are users that are Victor Harbour users. We have over 2,000 registered boat owners just in the 5211 postcode, with a similar number in our neighbouring council in 5214 down at Goolwa. Yes, there's potential for the part of the rationale that we put forward, that we got money from the federal government, the Building Better Regions Fund, to carry out the economic impact study, was that a tremendous amount of employment output and income would come to the Southern Fleurieu region from having, you know, cruise ships coming in here. But that'll be the case also if the Anchorage development goes ahead. That's our first big cruise ship. That it's going to be the region around us. It's not just Victor Harbour. And if we think about ourselves in this very narrow kind of navel-gazing way, that, oh, we're paying for it all and not getting any benefits, please read the Strickland report. There are considerable economic advantages to us being the transit hub for a facility, yes, that a lot of people will use. Yes, the issues about seagrass are well known and have been studied many times. And in some cases, you know, hang on, you might curtail seagrass growth in a particular area, but sometimes development leads to expansion of seagrass areas because the conditions for seagrass growing change when the sand moves, when the water level changes in relation to those sand movements. So I think what we're doing here is, again, making a bit of a mockery of ourselves as a place that really is thinking out of the box, that is looking at the conditions that we are living under here in our tourist industry, our own boat owners' requests and the difficulties they face. And this is, to me, sometimes we get carried away with the minutiae of these things and, oh, we've got to keep everything the same way forever. But on this occasion, I think if you want to kill off the creation of another boat landing facility on the eastern beach, then you can go ahead and do that. But that's the way you'll be remembered, as killing it off. And there are more intelligent ways of dealing with these sorts of developments and the considerable benefits that come from them than being, concerned about some of the very minor things, which I am confident that a well-built facility, would address. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Littley.
Thanks, councillors, for having quite a bit to say on this. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I agree with many of your points there. The Boating Advisory Working Group, the group of experts we have put in place to work through the conversation on these topics, this topic, the local experts haven't had the opportunity to discuss the report that came back to council at our workshop recently and before this matter came here. So I'm going to call that this matter be adjourned. So that report, it's a motion for adjournment for that report to be consumed by that group, and also some of the conversation that's already been had here can be taken into that thing. So my motion is to adjourn this item until such time as the Boating Advisory Working Group has had an opportunity to discuss the topic in more detail.
So Councillor Littley, that's a formal motion to adjourn until the working group has seen the report. Do I have a seconder for that formal motion? Councillor Robertson. There's no debate on a formal motion. So all those, I'll actually just wait for Karina to write that. Thank you. And that was seconded by Councillor Robertson. So I put that formal motion to the floor that the matter be adjourned to enable the Boating Working Facilities Group to review and provide comment to council decision. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. So we move now on to item 12.5. I will do Beatty Road and Three Gullies Roads review. We'll do the recommendation 1, 2 and 3 on block and do recommendation 4 separately if you're happy with that. If someone would like to move recommendation 1, 2 and 3. Thank you, Councillor Robertson, and seconded by Councillor Charles. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Councillor Charles, no. Anybody want to speak to that or have any questions? Councillor Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Under these recommendations, the first three, what cost to council is there in these areas in applying for a 50k zone. I know when we go to option 4, or recommendation 4, there are some costings, but is there any costings within that first 3 recommendations which council may bear?
Through the Mayor, Council. Thank you, Councillor Kemp. No, I believe we just go to the department and ask them about for their approval.
Any further questions or discussions? In that case, I'll put the first 3 recommendations to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. And the 4th recommendation, would someone like to move that? Would someone like to move that? Otherwise, that 4th recommendation will lapse. Thank you, Councillor Roberts.
I have a question, Mayor?
Yes.
One of the problems I had with recommendation 4 is that I could not understand it. I don't know if anyone else had the problem I had, but if that could be briefly explained, that would help a lot for me anyway.
Kathy? Thank you, through the Mayor. Third option, I guess looking at the images on the traffic study are probably easiest, but essentially from the Batty End Road of Three Gullies Road is narrower than if you come up toward the Jagger End Road, it's wider. So the idea there is that the road is narrowed, and on one side there is parking, and there'll be protuberances, whether they're painted or concrete, to try and reduce the speed. So essentially it is to narrow the driving lanes, which apparently supports lowering speed. It's a deterrent. And so the road becomes the same narrow width the whole way along. So that's the 3rd option there. So that narrow part is essentially in front of the houses toward, I think it's past Humpback and Southern Right, and toward the Jagger End Road. Sorry, the Jagger Road end.
Would someone like to move? Another question? Well, do you want to move? I wonder about moving and seconding this first so that it's on the table, and then you can ask questions. If no one's going to move it, you'll move it. Thank you. And Brian, at least second it. Thank you. Dave Kemp, you've got a question?
I can let the mover and seconder speak first before my question.
Okay. Do you want to speak to it? Councillor Littley, do you want to speak to it? Councillor Kemp, ask a question.
I guess the question is because we're going to be changing the speed limit. Should our community be aware of that, and are they in favour of it? Because it affects a fair bit of the Encounter Bay area, through that area to reduce it by 10 k's. And I would have thought reducing by 10 k's, the speed limit would be enough deterrent without putting in additional costs to the road. We can always just reduce the speed limit and then review it later before you start spending money in putting parking bays and etc. So at this stage, I'm not going to support it until we see what the Department of DIT does about the speed limit and review the issues after. But are we going to public consultation is my question. Thank you.
Through the Mayor, no, we weren't going to, at this stage, go to consultation. Council previously considered this and asked that we do a traffic impact statement and come back to the chamber with the outcome of that traffic impact statement. Just to confirm that option 3 is essentially we line marking to make the road narrower. It won't necessarily, I mean, the protuberances will be painted on, so not a great deal of expenditure. In terms of the whether the community may or may not be in favour, one of the aspects that triggered this was obviously safety, and the major, I guess, the surrounding roads around the town. If this goes to 50, they'll all be 50, so there'll be some consistency there. But yes, if the chamber would like to go to consultation, we could certainly do that.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Councillor Robertson, or do you want to close the debate? No, I'll put it to the floor then. All those in favour of recommendation 4? And those against? That's carried. Thank you.
Mayor Jenkins,
Councillor Kemp.
I'd like to move a motion to go to public consultation to get some feedback from our community on the effects of Batty Road. If it is a major thoroughfare through the area, it will impact on the community who live in that area, and hopefully they'll come back with that they're in favour of all this. But if not, I'd like to put a motion to undertake a public consultation.
Okay, can I just ask, in relation to that motion, perhaps while Karina's writing that down, could you tell me what the cost of that public consultation would be and what budget that would come out of? And how long that would take?
I'm guessing the cost would be under $1,000 in terms of the time. By the time we advertise and then had the 21 days, we probably may or may not get back for July meeting. So we might be July, August, depending on timing.
Can I ask a question before we
Mhm.
move this motion? I'm struggling to understand why we would want to go out to public consultation. The council just made a decision to change the speed limit. It's done and dusted. I don't know what you're going to, it's too late. Shouldn't have voted for it. Yeah. That's my opinion.
We've got a motion half on the floor. If we can't get a seconder, if people vote against it. Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, I'd just like to finish off my why I put this motion up. I mean, if we go to public consultation, I understand where Councillor Glasbrook comes from. Yes, it seems like a bit of a oxymoron to now put this up, but I suppose if the public opinion comes back, which is in the negative, like don't want it, we can always rescind these motions at a later date. So we can overturn them. So it's not wasted time. Thank you. I think we just need to communicate with our community more often about certain decisions that we make.
The question, perhaps Councillor Kemp, think about it, is whether or not there's ways that we communicate with the community in relation to a motion that has already been carried by the council, carried by the chamber, rather than going out to patient when the motion's been carried. So that might be something else to consider. But your motion is there. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Robertson, you want to second that?
Yeah. Yeah, Mayor, I'd support. I think that we should have asked the community down that end about this before we put it up. I support the safety aspects of it, etc. But we should have asked them, and I think better late than never.
Councillor Littley.
I won't be supporting the motion. I think that as a councillor, we're showing responsibility to act in the best interests of our whole community. It's not just the community along that section of road, but it's other road users who transverse through that area as well. I think it's responsible of us to act when we need to act, and I don't feel that in this case, I don't feel that public consultation is necessary. Regardless of what the result of that public consultation will be, I think that we've made a decision in the best interest of our whole community by changing a speed limit.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Henderson.
I believe that this came to the chamber because of initial concerns about speeding in that area by members of the community who live in that region and on that road. So in a sense, our community has already given us input into this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Any further comment or questions? Do you want to close the debate, Councillor Kemp?
No, thank you.
I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's lost. That motion's lost. We now move to 12.6. The Regional Community Sports and Recreation Facility. I'll do those recommendations en bloc. There's two of them. Would somebody like to move them together? Thank you, councillor Schofield. And a seconder, councillor Mann. Councillor Schofield, do you want to speak to the motion? Councillor Mann? No. Does anybody want to speak or have any questions? Councillor Kemp and then Councillor Robertson.
I won't be supporting this at this stage due to the fact that we still have our asset management plan and our long-term financial plan not linked together. We don't know where this facility will be sitting within those plans and the timeframes. To go out to community consultation on it might be premature due to the fact that it may end up being 3 or 4 years away. So I think we should actually do our consultation when we're pretty close to shovel ready to actually go out and do it, you know, at least 1 or 2 years out, not maybe 3 or 4. The reason why I say that because we still haven't bedded down our 2 major plans, which will drive our next 10 years of capital works. So I think we need to, you know, be a bit more vigilant about when we run consultations in alignment with that, because we've heard before in this chamber, you know, if once you run a consultation and people want it, people have an expectation. And we don't want to give people expectations. So that's...
Councillor Kemp, can I just draw your attention to the second part of recommendation 2 that says subject to the endorsement of the long-term financial plan. So if the long-term financial plan is not endorsed, then it won't be going out to community consultation, but this recommendation is going out subject to the endorsement of that plan. So that takes into account some of the concerns that you've raised.
Thank you very much for that and making that clarification. Yes, I'm aware of that, but I just wanted to reinforce that because how long before we do our long-term financial plan in conjunction with the asset management plan may change as well. So we, you know, it's a little bit up in the air at the moment. So I think we should wait. But anyway, I've said my piece, so I'm not supporting it as it is.
Sorry, I'm confused. Sorry, Councillor Kent, this is just for my clarification. I think you've confused me. You said you wanted to wait until the long-term financial plan's done?
Yeah, I'm also
linking. That's what this says.
Yes, I'm also linking the asset management plan into it as well.
Okay.
In my thoughts, confusing as it is.
No, that's all right. I'm just trying to get it clear.
That's fine because I'm linking the 2 plans together because they need to meet together. So not just a long-term financial plan.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson, you were next on my list.
Yes, Mayor. Some of my comments now are going to be about what would have been recommendation 1, because I find this report to be confusing and inadequate. I think we've been over and continue to plough the ground about this regional community sport and recreation facility. But if you turn to page 144, excuse me, turn to page 144 with a diagram of that of this facility that's there. My first question is, well, where is this facility that's on page 144? Is it on Gillespie's? Is it up at Encounter Lutheran? Because this is essentially basketball facilities and nothing much else. There's a gym included and basketball facilities. I presume that other sports like badminton and so forth can be played on the same courts. But, you know, there's 4 courts in there, roughly speaking. That's 15 million bucks for the whole thing. And so there's no indication given to the community in going out for public consultation that this particular facility is going to cost something of the order of 15 million, I would think, as a guess, but I'm happy to be corrected. But we're getting away from where we were initially with this regional community sport and recreation facility. The $46 million model that was put to us twice by Treadwell was covering athletics, was covering, of course, basketball, which is, you know, the most well, long-term and pressing need. The gyms, there were squash courts, there was other things as well. But this one is just really about gyms and basketball and gymnastics, basketball, and perhaps a couple of sports that can be played on the on basketball courts.
I'll ask Kathy Hayter to respond to that. My understanding is when we had the briefing and workshop, we looked at going to a medium size rather than the big size as a group, and this was the plan that came from that workshop, but perhaps Kathy Hayter can explain further. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Indeed, so when we did the council workshop and we looked at 3 different options, the lower cost, the medium, and then the wish list one, if you like, we decided, well, we thought then that we might go out to community consultation with a medium scale facility, so the $20 to $25 million facility, and that in terms of location, as you know, there is still some discussion happening, some confidential discussion happening there in terms of where a location might be. So we haven't included that as yet. We don't know when that might be resolved. In terms of the makeup of the stadium itself, one of the discussions that we had was around the state infrastructure plan and the funding criteria there around multi-use and trying to make it to maximise that community benefit. And that's the case for the indoor stadium, but not to say that we've forgotten about the others, for example, the athletics. And so we are still looking there potentially at the athletics being located at the public school and the oval there being upgraded to accommodate that rather than trying to build this massive $46 million facility. We're looking at scaling that back. So this plan that's here was, and you might remember that we looked at the Lightsview model as a case study, the Lightsview, or it's actually called the Lights at Lightsview, and that was a $25 million example. This one, in terms of footprint, is pretty similar to that, a little smaller, but it's got a different makeup based on the consultation that we've heard previously on the various master plan iterations. So this one it doesn't exist anywhere. It is purely a concept because we didn't want to go out to community with a blank slate and start again. So this is based on what both the chamber and the community to date have said. But that said, this will be augmented with those other considerations, for example, around athletics and some other folks who weren't consulted first time around.
My second question, I get that, but the medium facility was without some of the bells and whistles that we ended up with 46 million. But but some of the other sports have missed out here. So in terms of what's on this plan on page 144. But the second question I have was, where was this facility going to be put? Was it going to be on Gillespie's? Was it going to be included in an Encounter Bay area? Was it to be at Encounter Lutheran, since it was essentially a basketball court? Is it on some other piece of land? I mean, or is it just saying, we will build this and it'll go somewhere? So, because that'll be a question that'll come up in the public consultation. Well, where did you intend to put this? There's only 60 car parks here. So in terms of, even if it was stage 1 of a regional sporting complex, it's highly unlikely that the 60 parks is sufficient. You know, to me, when we go out for public consultation, we should be pretty clear about how much it's going to cost, where it's going to be, if this is stage 1 of 3 or 2, what's coming up, because we've only really hit a couple of the sports that that we had intended to in the original proposal.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Firstly, just on the car park. So this isn't intended to be that prescriptive. It's just an indicative concept In terms of all of the sports, so I take your point there. One of the things that we noted about the earlier iterations of the master plan is that not all sports were invited to participate in that. It was generally, there were some needs, I guess, that were identified, and those sporting clubs and associations were involved, but there is a broader set of community needs. So we know there are others who may well like to be involved. So what we're talking about doing is a broader consultation and asking more of the community what they would like to see. This is just a conversation starter. So those courts are intended to be multi-use. So we know, for example, that the badminton folks will fit within the basketball use in terms of the overall use, and we need to speak with those people about what might be there. The squash association, and we need to talk with the squash association because, you know, the Gillespie or the feasibility report done by Treadwell's had 6 squash courts, but we don't actually know that there's a demand for 6 squash courts. So one of the things we're trying to do is actually establish real demand, and rather than just go out with a wish list, actually try and build something that we know is needed, but then more broadly identify through this consultation those that won't fit into this really specific indoor stadium albeit with the augmented athletics, so that we've got a much more holistic overview, I guess, of what is required into the longer term. But this certainly acknowledges the immediate and the more urgent needs around basketball and gymnastics, but it's trying to get a bigger picture. So this is just a concept. And in terms of location, you're right, there are multiple locations that are still in consideration until and there are, as you'd know, there's some confidential discussions that are ongoing with the state. And until we get that resolved, we can't say to the community, here are all of the choices, or indeed to the chamber. So we haven't specified a location specifically because of those ongoing negotiations.
And then a question, a third one I was asking about was the cost. So my estimate, 3 million per court, and then times 4 courts, 12, add a bit more for cost overruns, whatever, 15, but if it's 25, that's might be more realistic. But so that's the third question. Do we have any idea of how much this would cost? And would we put it in a public consultation?
Thank you, through the Mayor. Yes, so we're aiming at a medium scale facility. So based on the very real and recent Lights View, where they started with a greenfield site, if you like, that from 3 years beginning to end was a $25 million build. So we have something here to start with that is about that same footprint. And then obviously as we progress through consultation, that might change, but we're basing it on one that we know is a medium scale facility of that quantum. And that's where we're starting with community. So we would certainly, I think, be able to say to community, we are looking at a medium scale facility. We're not, because I think managing the expectation is important around, we're not looking to build the bells and whistles. We actually want to know what is needed and how this can be as multi-use and as inclusive as possible.
And my last question would be about, does this particular build here compromise any future attempts to build, you know, co-host a facility with another institution here in Victor Harbor? Because to me, this kind of thing is, I think that potential for that option is a real game changer if it comes to situations where, hey, you're not going to be able to do anything about building additional basketball courts in Victor for maybe 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, through the Mayor. No, this doesn't rule out any of those discussions with the public-private partnership is, I think, what you're suggesting there. And we take the point about future-proofing. I guess what we're looking to do is something that is affordable and sustainable in its financial, and maybe that is a staged approach, but it's certainly by going out to consultation on this, we're not intending to close the discussion loop on any of those potential partnerships or on any of those locations at this point.
Thank you.
Well, finally, Mayor, just a comment, is that I take on board on page 140 here that, you know, we ourselves have mulled over this, this regional facility for most of this year and a fair bit of last year as well. And the plan is out, you know, about us doing that and going out to community consultation on this is, you know, I take on board this business that we do risk frustrating people in terms of not being, if we can't exactly say when this thing would likely to be, where and what it's going to be for, then, which it doesn't appear in this document anyway, then I think it's too early to be doing this.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, you wanted to say something?
Just a question, thank you, Mayor Jenkins, to administration. Just want to, I guess, clarify my understanding. Would I be correct in saying that this public consultation that we're looking to go out for is in response by a wish of council to expand the scope potentially of the development to include other community groups that aren't necessarily sporting groups, and the reason this consultation needs to happen now is so that we can establish that need of other groups and other partners potentially in the private space as well as to what this combined facility may look like. Would that be a sort of correct assessment of the matter?
Thank you, through the Mayor. Yes, that is a correct assessment, Councillor Mann. So I guess the multi-use inclusive is a desire of council and also of the state, and identifying those needs and what might naturally fit together. And more broadly, as we know, this is a long life cycle, expensive piece of infrastructure, and we want to make it as inclusive, as community friendly, as ensure its longevity as best we can. So you're absolutely correct. That is why we are looking to go to consultation, subject to the long-term financial plan being not too far off.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Kemp, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Because from what other people have been saying around the chamber, you know, is this premature, this consultation, or should we wait until we get more information to present to the community a better picture of when and where this may take place? So how many consultations do you believe that we should be doing? Because if there'd be one on this one, there'll be no doubt another one later on, another one later on locations and when. So do you envisage more than one public consultation on this matter?
Thank you, through the Mayor. Indeed, I think it's a big project, so there would be more than one consultation. I take the point about location might actually be a really important thing for community to consider. I guess at this point, we're looking to really establish what the need is. One of the things that we've heard through our case studies is that one of the most successful ways around community consultation is also asking community to self-identify who might use it. So that might ultimately shape and reshape the concept. So then there'll be another round of consultation around that concept itself. But I guess this initial one is around establishing that need and potentially getting users and users that haven't been identified yet to participate in this process around developing the concept. But it may be that the consultation best waits until we have some resolution on the location, which may not be that far off.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or commentary on this? Councillor Schofield, did you want to close the debate? No. I'll put in that case then the two recommendations to the floor. That's recommendation 1 and 2. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. The time is just about 8 o'clock when we're due for a break. So rather than go through another item, we might have a break now, if that's all right with everyone. And perhaps I'll see you back here at 8:10. Thank you very much.
high cost housing.
Okay, everybody's here. So we now go to item 13.1, which is a special audit committee meeting minutes of the 24th of May. I'll do this recommendation 1, 2 and 3 on block because it is noting the minutes and the feedback that the audit committee has provided. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Robertson, and seconded by, thank you, Councillor Henderson. Either of you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On these 3 recommendations, of course, the focus is on the 3rd one. And that is, we've already partially had a discussion on this tonight, but one of the things that wasn't resolved out of that discussion and won't be on a night like tonight is that what is the council's appetite for long-term borrowings? And the audit committee has done a great job here in reminding us of some of the constraints we should recognise or do recognise in terms of the way we run, our finances. And so I think that they've done a good job in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, did you want to say anything? Does anybody else have any comments or questions? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 13.2 is the Fleurieu Regional Community Services Advisory Committee minutes, and the recommendation is that they are received and noted. Moved by Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor Hales. Either of you want to speak to them? Anybody have any questions? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor. I notice on page 157 that and 158 in terms of what's going on here. And this comes back to an issue I'll touch on later on with regard to the community services review. And that is that here we are on 6.4 on page 157. And this is what I call mission creep. I appreciate that the palliative care services are, to me, it's a medical issue, but some people can see it as a well-being issue. But everyone, I'm sure, if they haven't caught up to it, would be realising that the state parliament's just passed the voluntary assisted dying legislation. I think I've got that correct. Voluntary assisted dying legislation. So what that's going to do to palliative care services, I think, is a big unknown. But I think we also need to, as over the other page on page 158, when we've got, again, it's good stuff, it shows concern, but it's all about boundaries and where we should be and where we can be. And that is, a community paramedics project. This is healthcare, pure and simple to me. Yes, the state government is not providing the palliative paramedic project with enough funding or resources. But hello, what's new about that? But to me, it's one of those things where, in terms of what we're doing in this community services program, is that we really should be focusing on, that preventative healthcare mission, that well-being program. So to me, it was just to highlight in that one. I appreciate the concerns. I appreciate the opportunities that are there, but in terms of our community services program, which are already stretched, and we can't do everything, that when we have this sort of proposal coming forward, that what we should be doing is resisting developing any further mission creep in regard to this program.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I don't think the committee was planning on doing anything. They were planning on responding to some community needs. But I'll ask Marilyn Henderson, who's chair of that committee, to perhaps respond to you. And then if Victoria's got anything else to add, she might like also to respond to some of the concerns that you've raised. Councillor Henderson.
Yes, I'd just like to point out that one of the other recurring reports to this committee is the Country SA Primary Health Network, and that's on page 158 as well. And that's been the case ever since I've chaired this committee, which is since the beginning of my term on council here. So that's always been part of input into this committee and taking feedback from the committee as well. So it's nothing new, and so there's other community concerns about health, etc., naturally fall into that space.
Victoria?
Through the Mayor, I guess just to reiterate Councillor Robertson's concerns, the committee's doing exactly what it's been engaged to do by way of its terms of reference, and that's to, the purpose is assisting and improving the quality of life, independence and wellbeing of communities in the region. And one of its key areas or purpose is to identify current and emerging regional community service needs and make recommendations on priorities for future planning and service development. So it's not so much about council delivering, it's about knowing what our needs are in our community and advocating on its behalf. It's also required to have 2 regional health hospital care workers on the committee to actually feed into that. So I believe it's doing its purpose, or working towards delivering on its purpose.
Thank you, Victoria. Any further comments or questions in relation to those minutes? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 13.3, Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee minutes. I'll do the recommendation and recommendation 1 and 2 on block. Moving that way, Councillor Henderson. Thank you. And seconding, Councillor Littley. Do either of you want to speak to them? Councillor Henderson.
Excuse me. I just want to point out that the dot points there just show how important it is to have this sort of committee within our council, because there are many things that those of us who are able-bodied in every sense don't think to consider when we're planning developments such as the Arts and Culture Centre project. So it just points out that this is quite an important committee, and the fact that we have many community members on this committee that raise these points, which are extremely important when we're considering a new building proposal or a refurbishment, and just how important that input is.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Littley, did you want to speak to the motion?
Just quickly, I've just taken the opportunity to the work that the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee do is fantastic. Just wondering, and it's in front of my mind now, an issue with the footpaths at the top of Portalet Road into the BP service station. I know we'd spoken about it when I was on the committee, and it's just reminded me that it was highlighted in the past week by other members of the community of that footpath that runs into the driveway, entrance driveway of the service station, and the condition of that footpath. I'm wondering whether for members, or at least for me, I can, through the chair, whether I can get a copy of the identified disability access prioritised footpaths that we had identified over 18 months ago, and just a status update on those. Probably not the most appropriate time to do it, but landing right in front of me, it's reminded me of it.
I'll see if Kathy Hayter can follow that up for you and perhaps take that on notice. Thank you. Any Further questions or comments in relation to those two recommendations? If not, all those in favour? Those against? Thank you. 13.4, minutes of the Southern Communities Transport Scheme. Would someone like to move the recommendations that the minutes are received and noted? Thank you, Councillor Kemp, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that or have any questions? If not, all those in favour? Those against? Carried, thank you. (14.1) are the subsidiary and representative reports. And the first recommendation is that council receive and note the representative reports for June, moved by, I have a mover, thank you, Councillor Robertson, and seconded by Councillor Charles. Either of you have any comments? No? Anybody have any comments or questions? All those in favour? Those against? Carried, thank you. The Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority Audit Committee, approval of interim measures. I'll do that recommendation on block. Moving that way, Councillor Kemp. And seconding by Councillor Glasbrook. Either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I think it's great to see that Fleurieu have now got an audit committee together. I'm surprised though they've only got one independent member on it. I thought they would have gone out for independence and not using council representation on it. But maybe they can do that next time round. But look, congratulations to the Fleurieu for moving ahead and getting their audit committee process in place.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Glasbrook, do you want to speak to that?
I'll just clarify that the audit committee has been going for quite some years now. This is not a new committee. It's just a change of the committee, and it's in the interim, as it says in the recommendations there, because if and when the charter review is endorsed, the audit committee will probably change again. So there's just a couple of different people on there. Really, is the change.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Anybody else want to speak to that or have any questions? In that case, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 10.3, the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority's performance report and third budget review. The recommendation 1 and 2 I'll do on block if someone would like to move that way. Councillor Glasbrook, thank you. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hales. Either of you want to speak to that? No? Councillor Hales? No? Councillor Robertson, you have a question or want to speak to it?
Yeah, I have a question there. Top of page 210, the second budget review forecasts a surplus of 487,000, which was down from the surplus of 802,000, with the 300 odd thousand dollars difference being retained by the board for the provision of funds to fund the costs associated with this contamination of 50 kilograms out of 4,500 tonnes of rubble for asbestos. Is that, I guess that $300,000, my first is the question about the $300,000 that's kept in reserve. That'll be, if it was used, that would be spread across all the councils involved.
I'll ask Karen to answer that for you, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you for the question through the Mayor. The retained funds they'll be held only for a period of time that will allow Fleurieu to actually work through the process of dealing with the asbestos contaminated material and really understand its full costs and extent of liability in that respect. If there comes a point in the future where surplus funds are distributed, it would be by Fleurieu's usual formula or a formula to be determined by the board. So it's on hold ultimately at this point in time.
Yeah, because the second question was, it seems to me to be grossly unfair and not rational either, that this discovery, however it was made, that some 50 kilograms of not 50 kilograms of asbestos, but 50 kilograms of asbestos contaminated rubble was found in an estimated amount of 4,500 tonnes of gravel, that really the costs that were being set aside to deal with this, when my understanding is that a lot of that rubble has already been laid on, I guess, roads and so on. How were we being, do we have any idea of what process is going to take place to try and, you know, fumble through the rubble and find the bits and put them in a bag and bury them, or what's all the costs associated with this?
Through the chair, at this stage, the Whātua board are working through the process, but for anybody who may have purchased the material, the recommendation is that they contact Whātua, who will work through the process with them directly. So we are encouraging them to please come forward and contact Whātua directly for further advice.
I wouldn't want to trivialise the dangers of inhaling asbestos dust, but it does seem to me that there is sometimes there are accidents that happen, and this would have definitely been an accident, that we're recovering of that asbestos material is, I would say, ridiculous. I'd be far more interested in spending the money on equipping Whātua facilities to be able to detect the contaminated material coming into their site, rather than going and trying and picking it up afterwards.
Are there any further questions? Can we keep it questions and comments specifically to the recommendations as well? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I suppose either Councillor Glasbrook or maybe Director Rokozinski may. In the page 211, it talks about the summary of the third quarter review. It's interesting information in here when they talk about the income's up 12%, the expenditure slightly less. It talks about additional costs incurred in waste disposal. You know, employees' costs are above budget due to increased waste tonnages and staff time. But when you go down to the other areas of curbside collections, under budget by 90%. Waste and recycle depots are down 27% under budget. So if the first part talks about increases of staff time and everything like that, in time in doing these two areas of curbside collection and waste and recycle depots, how come we're under budget in those areas if the staff time and additional costs of waste has gone up?
Karen?
I'd have to take that one on notice, speak with Simon in more detail.
Are there any further comments or discussion points? Councillor Glasbrook or Hales, Councillor Glasbrook, do you want to close the debate? No. In that case, I'll put the recommendation on block to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now come to the mayoral report, and the recommendation is that council receive and note the June report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded by Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to it or have any questions? Anybody have any questions? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The elected member reports. Would someone like to move the recommendation that they are accepted? I'll just look at this. The recommendation on 5.2 actually isn't written down there, so it should be to receive and note the elected member reports. It's not on my, it's on the screen. Yep. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded Councillor Robertson. Do you have any questions or anything you want to ask? Does anybody have any questions or any commentary? No. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. There are no matters of urgency. There are no questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. It's a short one. My question on notice is, will Business Victor Harbour be providing an acquittal of council funds at the end of financial year 2021, similar to other council grant recipients?
Victoria?
We can seek that from Business Victor Harbour. It's probably would be a requirement of all funding that we provide to other organisations. And given we are looking to provide another grant of 100,000, be beneficial.
Do you need a motion in relation to that, or is that something that you can just request from them? Thank you, Councillor Hales. Did that answer your question? Any other questions on not without notice? There are no motions on notice, motions without notice. There are no confidential items, and so I bid you good night. Thank you very much. 8:30 must be a record for the meeting. It's a very good meeting. I think some good decisions made. Thank you very much, everybody.